That's his.
That's fun. Well, right. Maybe I should just say a few words about this story. I grew up in South Africa and then India, and so one of the families in the story is an East Indian family. And I'm also of Welsh heritage. I was president of the St. David's Welsh Society for a couple of years here. So I know the Welsh somewhat, right? And so there's this sort of clash. I took part in Heritage Days quite often, helping with Welsh tent, etc. You know, this stories are born out of your experiences in life sometimes, and I put two things together. So anyway, this story is called Heritage Days, but days is spelled D-A-Z-E. Right. So, okay. It starts off, okay. Gita, now you listen to me. Beti, dekho, you will definitely be going back to India and marry Mr. Upadhyay. There is no doubt about it. Your Uncle Ram has been going to so much trouble and has made such a fine match for you. Generations of Brahmin authority lay behind the certainty of the father's declaration. He continued, are you realizing how lucky you are, girl? You know, you Brahmin girl. The Upadhyayas are the richest landowners in Bihar. You know, first-class Brahmin heritage. They are so rich that they had their own army to fight off the Naxalites in the 1970s. At these words, Mr. Sharma shuddered as he remembered the brutal slaughter of many of his own relations at Naxalite hands. He recalled aloud, young Satish was just a boy then, but you should have seen his father, a dashing figure in camouflage fatigues. What a man. And Uncle Ram tells me that Satish is much like his father. Yeah, you are a lucky girl, Gita. Child, respect your elders. He tried to glare at his beautiful daughter, the beauty of Mill Woods, the hub of Edmonton's large Indian community. Ram had not had trouble finding a match, an excellent one, in Mother India, where a bride from the Indian worldwide diaspora brought prestige into the marriage contract. But there was a problem, and it was standing before him with a defiant look that he had never encountered before. Looking at him, Gita stated, but father, Papaji, look at what you are asking. You want me to marry this elderly man whom I have never seen? She thrust out a photograph of Satish Upadhyay, a portly man, now probably in his 50s, and he has at least 5 children. I'll be expected to be a mother too. No, thank you. I'm a Canadian girl and intend to remain here. I will marry a man of my choosing. With these words, Gita had in mind Geraint Hughes, the Welsh-Canadian boy she'd met at last year's Heritage Days. They'd been seeing each other regularly, but on the quiet ever since. Now Heritage Days was coming round again, and the last year had been a happy one. They'd started talking about long-term commitments, and it seemed to her that after their education was complete at medical school and in engineering, they would probably get married. That was the sort of future she'd envisaged, not what this proposal by her parents suggested. It had come out of the blue. She'd no idea that her parents had been looking. Caught between the worlds of Bhagavad Gita and McDonald's, she was happy to hear that her mother's voice from the kitchen would get her out of confronting her father. Geeta, my pet, come please to help me. The filling for the samosas has to be prepared. There is much work. I promised to make 300 samosas for Heritage Days. Geeta thankfully broke the impasse by joining her mother. Soon she was rolling out balls of dough that had settled overnight into triangular shapes, out of which Mrs. Sharma spooned a mixture of onto which a mixture of peas and potatoes, and expertly folded them into smaller triangles ready for the deep fryer. The assembly line nature of the work allowed Geeta to work, proficiently and still ponder the latest snag in her life. The ghee is nice and hot, remarked Mrs. Sharma, an expert in judging when the golden brown triangles were ready to be lifted from the deep fryer and put on a porous tray to drain off the excess. So, not too greasy, like some which had been made in too much of a hurry. This day, she gave special attention to her cooking as a defense, a shield against the tense atmosphere. She saw that Geeta would talk to her. She always did. They were very close. But what should she say? She saw with agonizing understanding both sides of the issue. Naturally, hers too had been an arranged marriage, but not one between total strangers. She had known Mr. Sharma all her life. He had been part of her world, the boy who lived in the beautiful pink house surrounded by lovely beds of phlox and cannas. When Geeta had shown her a poem she was studying at school about an arranged marriage in China, she had understood perfectly the feelings of the young bride and the love that had blossomed after marriage. She understood about the blue plums in the poem, but in her case it had been mangoes. The youngest of the Sharma boys, Rajesh, had been an excellent tree climber. He was always throwing down lovely, ripe, yellow and red mangoes to the youngsters, eagerly awaiting under the leafy canopy. Once, on looking up, she saw more than mangoes, but she never thought then that she would ever gain intimate knowledge of the area that she'd seen. No, the case was different with Geeta, but she was Brahmin, and as such she had a duty that generations and miles should not diminish. After 2 piles of samosas had been laid out to soak up excess ghee, Geeta broached the subject. Mummy ji, dekho, I can't go to India and marry that old man. It's unthinkable. Even if he were my age, I couldn't do it. You and Dad are Indian, but I am not like you. Please, Mummy, I'm not trying to hurt. I'm an Indian, but a Canadian Indian. Canadian, that is the important word. If you stayed in India, but you didn't. You brought me here as a baby. She could have gone on for a long time. She'd have gone into further detail, but it would only have deepened the chasm she felt opening, particularly between herself and her father. Softly, her mother answered, I understand, baby, my pet. Not completely, but I understand that it is your life. However, I also understand your father. It is not just the prestige and money, as you may think. No, my child, it's more than that, much more. Gently pressing the edges of a samosa, she continued, we are Brahmin. Arranged marriages are our way of life, baby. They have been for centuries. Not all of them have turned out perfectly, oh no, but most have. Mine wouldn't, it couldn't possibly. The iron in Geeta's voice was strong. Yes, I am of Indian heritage, but I'm firstly Canadian. And then I'm a modern Indian girl. I'll rebel against these traditions. as thousands are doing all over India, particularly among the educated classes. Geeta had been reading and keeping up with the trends of modern India, of the recently emboldened women's movement in her parents' country. Mrs. Sharma nodded. She too was aware of the Western ideas that were challenging conservative tradition and turning India, or taking India, as the newspaper The Statesman had stated, kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And kicking and screaming it would be. For priests in remote rural villages in India still practiced the old ways. Even sati, where a young wife was still burnt on the funeral pyre of her much older husband. The difference in age disturbed her. Even though Bihar appeared to be sati-free, Mrs. Sharma feared that the state of widowhood could fall on her baby. Mrs. Sharma had been lucky. She and her husband were much of the same age. After she had given thanks that the boy from the wonderful pink house, the best mango provider in the district, had been chosen for her, or rather, that she had been chosen for him, right? Geeta broke in on her thoughts. No stranger for me. Just like you, Mummy, I know who I'm going to marry, not today, not tomorrow, but definitely in the next few years. You know, Geraint and I have been making plans. Seeing the astonishment on her mother's face, she hurried on. We're going to wait till we graduate. I'll be a doctor and he an engineer. And then she pleaded, oh, Mummy ji, dekho, don't try to stop me. Geraint? That's a strange name. Yes, Mummy, he's Welsh. Remember the boy I met at Heritage Days last year? Remember little Arjun was so pleased when he stamped a red dragon on his hand. Mrs. Sharma recalled the joy of her youngest son at the red dragon which he had shown off to everybody. Welsh? Oh, Geeta, baby, surely not Welsh. They are hill people, you know? They're the hill people of Britain. Hill people. They're always so backwards. He was a nice boy, but he's from the hill people. I think you have been seeing him. All these long nights at university have not always been spent in studying. That is so, is it not? Please, Geeta, you must remember that you are Brahmin, and he is a hill boy. Oh, Mummy, hill boy indeed. Yes, Wales is mountainous, hilly, but the Welsh are not like some of the backwards hill people in India that you've talked to me about. He's going to be an engineer. Nothing backward about that. Mrs. Sharma nodded, but there was still doubt in her mind. That evening she told Mr. Sharma, a fuming Mr. Sharma, about Geraint Hughes. That is it. No more nonsense. I'll contact Ram very quickly. Yes, indeed. This marriage will be brought forward. Miss Geeta will find herself on a plane in 2 shakes. I'm sure the Upadhyas will agree to her finishing medical school in India. And even if they don't, she is a Brahmin girl, and her first duty is to be a good wife. Softening his voice, he added, just as you had been, my dear, a good Brahmin wife. Next morning, Mr. Sharma told Geeta that she would be going to India sometime sooner than expected. It will take Ram a few days to hurry things up. We will all be leaving probably a month or so after Heritage Days. Geeta said nothing. She stood stock still, clenched and unclenched her fists. Then she turned around smartly and marched away to phone Geraint. A couple of hours later, they met on campus. Well, Geraint said, this certainly changes things. Surely they cannot send you against your will. Oh, either that, or they'll chuck me out. To my dad, being a Brahmin and following the old ways means everything. Believe me, though he loves me, he would not hesitate to disown me. On the edge of tears, Geeta felt further explanation was needed. He is part, I think, of a rearguard action in Indian people. In a country where strong women like Indira Gandhi and many others have held sway, there are those who believe strongly in the old ways, some of which denigrate women, consequently rape, dowry killings, forced prostitution, and acid throwing are atrocities still today, particularly among the less enlightened. And my dad, bless him, is among them. He is not a bad person, but he is bound by his heritage. Being Brahmin has been inculcated into him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Geraint nodded. Yes, I think I understand a little. With me, it's my mum. I can't say that she likes Asians. To her, they're all natives. She's not a bad person, but her prejudices got worse when we went back to Wales 2 years ago. Things had changed dramatically in her hometown. In the years while she was away, a large Indian community had arisen, a tribal immigration rather than an individual one that shocked her. Gone were many of the familiar haunts and customs of her girlhood. Gita agreed, yes, there's a big difference between tribal and individual immigration. I think I can understand your mum's feelings. Since we came back, she talks often about her grandfather. He was a big shot of Bara Sahib in the days of the British Raj in India. Evidently, he was a High Court judge, a magistrate who dispensed justice to the natives. She always calls Indians natives. But you know, I think she should meet you. My dad knows that we've been going together, but my mum doesn't. It's about time she did. How about coming over tomorrow to help her make some tish and lap as a moist plate cake for Heritage Days and some Welsh cakes? She prides herself on her cakes. Just flatter her a little. Laughing, Gita added, oh, just like Mummy with the samosas. I helped her make a whole batch yesterday. Megan Hughes was none too happy to hear that Geraint was bringing his girlfriend to help her with the plate cakes. Really, Geraint, there is no deepak. You know that I made half the tish and lap every year for Heritage Days with no problem. True, Mum, but I thought you could do with some help this year. I know that you are mending quite a few of the costumes too this year. How kind of you. Very thoughtful. Then she stopped and looked hard at him. Are you getting serious about this one, Geraint? He blushed. Smiling, his mum added, what's her name? Tell me about her. How long have you known her? Well, her name is Gita, and I met her at last year's Heritage Days when she brought her young brother, Arjun, into our tent to get the red dragon stamped on his hand. Yes, that red dragon stamp was certainly a hit. Annually, Megan Hughes became fanatically Welsh, more Welsh than she ever would have been in Wales. You know, for 2 weeks, up to and including Heritage Day, she was Welsh, Welsh, and Welsh. More, than ever. After thinking a moment, she stared into space. Geraint, this Gita, that sounds like a native name. Tell me, you've not been going with a native girl? Oh, Geraint, Bach, not. Being terribly formal, Geraint stated, Mother, she's an Indian girl. Her parents come from India. She came from India when she was little. She was an Indian Canadian. I asked her to come over tomorrow for the two of you to meet. Please, Mum, you're not going to snub her, are you? Mrs. Hughes bridled. Of course not. We Welsh have manners. My grandfather was always polite to the natives, no matter what the provocation. No, the girl will receive a polite welcome. She'll probably get underfoot and won't know the first thing about tish and lap. The only dishes those natives know are curries. Ew. Horrible, awful smelling food. What? Mrs. Jones told me how her Indian neighbors cook the stuff every day. can't understand why it's becoming so popular. Well, and the smell just pervades everything. Don't worry, dear. I'll be polite. Overnight, Gita had checked the internet for a few Welsh phrases and also looked up recipes of Tishanla. She'd even asked Geraint to pronounce Tishan properly. So Mrs. Hughes was surprised at the girl's knowledge and recalled that her grandfather had given credit where it was due. After telling her one of his favorite stories, she said, mind you, some of them aren't clever. These damn natives, damn clever, some of them, smart buggers at times. At first, Mrs. Hughes was polite, but cool. However, in the camaraderie of the kitchen, she slowly bent. Finally, after watching the girls' dexterity in kneading the dough, her fine judgment in mixing the ingredients, she complimented Gita. You're certainly at home in the kitchen. You'll make some man a fine wife. Realizing her gaffe, Mrs. Hughes turned away a little in chagrin at her stupidity. Geraint, who'd heard her, smiled and was about to add his agreement. But Mr. Hughes cut in. You both will probably see a fair amount of each other at Heritage Days this weekend, as our tents are next to each other. Now, next to each other? Mrs. Hughes showed her consternation, and though she added, that will be nice, won't it? It was not a warm phrase. Gita and Geraint exchanged quick, happy glances. They would not have to walk halfway across the large park to see each other as they had done the previous year. Friday evening, sunny and pleasant, saw both societies busy setting up all the paraphernalia of their cultures in their tents. With the Indians, the selling of their aromatic food was center stage. With the Welsh, it was the harp and the harpist and music. Gita and Geraint spent most of their time together, despite efforts of three of their parents to separate them. The fourth, David Hughes, glanced at them occasionally. He saw the attraction that his son Geraint had for Gita and couldn't blame him. If they decide to make a go of things, he thought, Megan will have to come to terms with a native daughter. He recalled Megan's answer when he remarked, my dear, we are all natives of somewhere. Even your grandfather was a native of Wales. With scorn, she retorted, Ach, ich hab die bach, ich hab die. Nonsense. What nonsense? Don't try to be clever. You know what natives I'm talking about. Them and their smelly curries. All through the weekend, the smell of curry, particularly when the wind was favorable, wafted into the Welsh tent. There was no contest. The delicate aromas of Tishanla and Welsh cakes were no match with the overpowering odors of samosas and curry. At first, the presence of the East was not annoying to most, but by Sunday evening, the frazzled frazzled nerves of the overworked volunteers began to tell. One of the Welsh stalwarts wondered, does the smell get into one's clothes? Oh, just like smoking? Might have to send these clothes to the cleaners. Oh, as for the Indians, the problem was with the sharing of time for music. Every half hour, alternate tents took turns to broadcast their entertainment to the world. But often, the time allotted was not enough, and it was irritating to cut performers short. And very often, tents made deals with each other to switch over every hour or more, so that their performers could complete their acts properly. Right? Indeed, such an arrangement had been made between the heads of the Welsh and Indian tents, but unfortunately, not everybody had been informed. On Sunday evening, frayed tempers on both sides took over, when on the hour, the erstwhile changeover did not occur. Verbal hostilities broke out. On the Indian side, Mr. Sharma led the fray. Riled by Geeta's insistence on spending her time, almost all the time, with Geraint, he blurted out angrily, "You, Welsh, who are you? A hill tribe in Britain. You should not even have a tent. There should be just a corner in the British tent." Then, turning to Geeta, he showed the real reason for his outburst. "As for you, my girl, enough of this nonsense. You will not see this hill boy anymore. No, definitely not. This tomfoolery is all done. Next week, earliest flight, you will be going to India. You will stay with Auntie Lakshmi while wedding arrangements are made, and we will follow later. Yes, sir, first plane, Tuesday, definitely Wednesday." Megan Hughes, her face beat red in anger, and her voice shrill, walked right up to him, her face, upturned, barely a foot away from him. You bloody stupid upstart native. My grandfather certainly would have known how to deal with you. He set a lot of your type straight in court. Yeah, hill people indeed. That shows how little you know in your ignorance. Our society, the Welsh, is one of the oldest in Edmonton. Respect your elders. Turning his back on turning her back on Sharma, she addressed her son. "Geraint, yes, Geeta's a nice girl, but see what you're getting involved with, these mannerless natives." Geeta had gasped at her father's rude outburst, and Geraint's face had just turned puce, mortified by his mother's tirade. Quietly they melted into the crowd which had been attracted by the altercation. Soon they were sitting, having a coffee outside a tent in another part of the park. After putting their heads together, metaphorically and almost literally, Geeta nodded at Geraint's declaration. "We'll have to ask fast. We have to act fast. Everyone will still be here until about 10 o'clock. We have time." In both tents, the absence of Geeta and Geraint was noticed, particularly when it was time to pack up for the day. Tempers flared. Mr. Hughes tried to calm things down with the other three parents. They'll turn up when they settle down a bit. Surely, it's understandable that they too have been upset and want some time to themselves. Each mother blamed the other's child for leading her own pet astray. Right? Mr. Sharma silently stood there, refusing to take part in the heated exchange of the mothers. When they had been exhausted, he picked up his mobile phone and phoned the police. Right? The missing persons report he was trying to make was not successful, since the couple had been missing just a few hours.